Welcome back to Driftwood Stories, where the wind carries not just peace, but memory, where even war leaves footprints in the dust. Tonight, we walk not into battle, but into the heart of it. This is the story of Ares, god of war, son of Hera, shield-bearer, storm-bringer. But not the tale as it's often told, not one of noise and rage. This is a quieter war, a war of thoughts, of choices, of standing still when the world begs you to strike. So close your eyes, let the drums grow distant, and listen to what comes after. Chapter 1. Born from the Storm. Before Ares had a name, the world already knew his voice. It was the sound of thunder rolling over bronze, of steel drawn in fear, of a cry shouted not in victory but in desperation. It was a sound that had existed long before mortals, long before memory, a pulse that beat at the heart of conflict itself. But when he was born, it became a shape. Ares was the son of Hera, brought forth not from love but from vengeance, a child created to match the fire of Zeus, to strike as he struck, to shake the world as he did. There was no lullaby at his birth, no cradle of stars, only the clash of clouds, and a sword placed beside him as if it were a brother. From the first, Ares was alone. The other gods admired Apollo's light, Athena's wisdom, Artemis's grace. But Ares, he was fire without music, strength without sweetness. They called him dangerous, reckless, loud. Even as a child he felt it, the distance. And so he turned toward what never turned from him, the forge, the training ground, the sparring field. He grew tall, broad, fast. His footsteps echoed like hooves, his voice like drums. But he did not laugh when he fought. He did not boast. There was something heavy in his strikes even then, something hollow. He trained under every master Olympus offered. He bested them all. He crushed boulders, split spears, roared across mountain tops until the birds stopped singing. And still, he felt no peace. Victory came easily, but it did not fill him. What he did not know, could not yet name, was that he had been born into a role, not a truth, a shape the gods expected, a flame to point at enemies. But not once had anyone asked what war was to him. He was a storm made flesh. But storms, even divine ones, pass. And what comes after is silence. Ares feared that silence, because in it he might hear himself. And so he ran faster, struck harder, roared louder, and Olympus looked on and called him strong. Chapter 2. The Boy of Bronze and Flame. Ares grew fast. By the time he could walk, he could run. By the time he could speak, he shouted, not in defiance, but as if afraid no one would hear him unless the ground itself trembled. The other gods watched him with caution. They saw the way the earth cracked beneath his heels when he trained, the way weapons bent in his hands as if they were reeds. They whispered that he was Hera's fury made flesh, that even as a boy he carried war in his blood. But they did not see the quiet hours. They did not see him sit alone in the stone courtyard at dusk, staring at his own hands. They did not hear the way he sometimes held his breath, as if trying to still the pulse inside him, to silence the storm he hadn't asked to carry. He was praised for what he destroyed, but no one ever asked what he loved. His armour came early, bronze plates forged by Hephaestus, gifted not as a rite of passage, but as a warning. "They fear you," Hephaestus said with a crooked smile. Might as well look the part, and so Ares wore it. But he never felt it belonged to him. It fit his body, but not his soul. The helmet was too loud, the shield too heavy, and the sword always seemed to be humming, as if urging him forward even when he wished to rest. He trained with Athena once, when he was still young enough to hope. She was quick, clever, cool as marble. Their first bout lasted 3 minutes. She disarmed him with a flick of her wrist, stepped back and said, "You are force without focus." He looked at the cracked tiles beneath them. She added, softer, but not without promise. He wanted to ask what that meant, what she saw when she looked at him. But the words never came, so he nodded and left. From then on, he trained alone. He built a sparring ground high above the clouds, where no one else could hear the clang of metal or the breath he swallowed between blows. He struck boulders until they shattered. He screamed into the wind until his voice broke, and sometimes, when the sky turned red, he would sit with his sword across his knees, watching the birds fly far below, and whisper to himself, "What am I for?" No answer came, only the sky watching, only the wind still. One day, as he wandered through a lesser-known field near the edge of the mortal world, he found a group of boys, mortal boys, training with sticks. They lunged, shouted, laughed. There was joy in their movement, joy in the fall and the rise. They saw him. They froze. One boy stepped forward, trembling. "Will you teach us?" he asked. Ares looked down at his gauntlets. His shadow stretched long across the grass. He saw their bruises, their crooked stances. He saw how their leader had split his lip and smiled through it. He nodded, just once, and for the next hour Ares taught, not to kill, not to conquer, but to breathe, to wait, to move without needing to strike. He saw, for the first time, what his hands could do that did not end in harm. When the boys left, they bowed. He did not stop them, but he watched them go and felt something quiet bloom in the chest plate he'd long stopped noticing. A warmth. It faded, of course, as it always did, but it remained, faintly, like an ember under ash. That night, as he stood beneath the stars, he did not train. He did not shout. He simply whispered into the dark. "Let me find it. Let me find the reason." The sword across his back did not hum. The wind did not answer. But far below, in a mortal village not yet scarred by war, a baby cried, and Ares heard it. And for the first time, he did not feel like a god. He felt like something else entirely, a man with a choice. Chapter 3. The Clash of Crowns. It began, as such things often do, with pride. 2 mortal kings, 2 banners raised beneath the same sun, a stolen bride, a bitter oath, and soon the clash of crowns echoed across the land. The war was loud, quick to burn, and yet it lingered. Armies gathered like thunderheads on either side of the valley. Metal shone in the sunlight, Children clung to their mothers and learned the shape of silence. And in Olympus the gods looked down and stirred. Zeus saw opportunity, Athena saw strategy, but Ares felt something else, a call, not a command, not a temptation, a pull from the bones of the earth, from the heat of blood, from the breath of men who stood shaking in armour that did not fit. He did not descend in glory. He arrived as dusk fell, his feet dark with ash, his shield slung like shadow. Mortals did not cheer, they fell silent. He walked through their camp like a storm already past. He saw soldiers polishing blades with trembling hands, young boys pretending to laugh around the fire, old men who should have been telling stories by the hearth, now sharpening axes with broken teeth. The general approached him, armour gleaming. "Lord Ares, we are honoured. Lead us, and we shall crush them." Ares said nothing. He walked to the edge of camp and looked out across the valley. On the other side, fires flickered just the same laughter, the same fear, the same prayers whispered into the dirt, and suddenly it felt absurd. The two armies mirrored each other like a riddle with no answer. Different banners, same eyes, different chants, same heartbeat. He stepped onto the battlefield at dawn, not to fight, to listen. The two sides saw him and readied their lines, expecting a charge. But Ares did not draw his sword. He walked the length of the valley, armour gleaming gold and black, eyes cast not at the warriors, but at the sky. "Is this what I am?" he asked aloud. "A god of panic and pride?" The clouds gathered, and then the arrow came, a single shaft, loosed by a nervous hand, whistling through the air toward his chest. He caught it, snapped it, dropped it into the dirt, and then he shouted, not a war cry, a roar of grief, of futility, of all the times he had been called down to settle disputes that never should have begun. The ground shook, the fire sputtered, and both armies stepped back. But war, once lit, does not wait for its gods. A general called a charge. The swords rose, and the valley drowned in sound. Ares fought. He could not help it. The rhythm took him, the clash of steel, the surge of strength. He moved like flame, like thunder, every strike a hymn of fury, but even as he moved, something in him remained still, a voice, not Athena's, not Hera's, his own. "What are you doing? Why? What will be left?" By nightfall, the valley was quiet again. Smoke curled over broken banners, bodies lay like fallen trees, and Ares stood alone in the centre, his sword buried deep in the earth, his shoulders rising and falling like waves. He had won. The field was his, but nothing in him sang. The silence returned, pressing close, and this time he did not run from it. He walked through the ash and the blood until he reached the far edge of the battlefield. And there, amid the wreckage, he saw something impossible. A figure, still, unburnt, unbroken. A child? No, not a mortal child. Something else. It stood among the fallen, its eyes grey as stone, its hands empty. Not weeping, not praying, just waiting. Ares narrowed his gaze. and for the first time since his birth he felt it again, the pull, but not toward war, toward something after. Chapter 4. The Spirit in the Smoke. The figure did not speak. It stood in the drifting ash, as if it had always been there, as if it had risen from the ground like steam, like breath, like memory. Ares approached cautiously, not out of fear, for what was left to fear, but out of something rarer, respect. The closer he came, the more certain he became this was no child, no soldier, no god. It was something older, wearing a face that could belong to anyone, eyes like burnt stone, clothes the colour of earth, and though the wind tugged at its shape, it did not sway. It simply watched him. He stopped a few paces away. "Who are you?" he asked. No answer came, but in his chest something stirred, as if the words had reached him anyway. Ares looked around at the valley, the battlefield still heavy with smoke, the broken spears, the scattered helmets, the fallen. This was what they called him for. This was his domain, but the figure made it feel different, not like a throne, but a grave. He looked back at it. "Are you a ghost?" he asked. Still no answer. But the figure tilted its head slightly, and Ares understood. Not a ghost, a spirit, of what war leaves behind, of the stories never told, the screams that echo long after peace is declared, the silence that falls on a village where only dust remains. He stepped closer. He looked into the spirit's eyes and saw himself, not as the gods saw him, not as the mortals feared him, as he truly was, a boy, alone, a fist raised but uncertain, a heart too full of fire to hold anything else. He took a breath. The spirit took one too, and in that shared silence something passed between them. Not forgiveness, not shame, only knowing. Ares reached for his sword, not to raise it, to offer it, but when he did, it was gone, vanished, melted, nothing but dust in his hands. He looked down, then at the spirit. It watched him still. "I don't know who I am without it," he admitted. The wind stirred the ash between them, "but I want to find out." The spirit blinked once and turned, and Ares followed. They walked side by side through the valley, past banners, past bodies, past memory. No one else saw them, no one else remained, only the war and what comes after. When they reached the far edge of the battlefield, the spirit turned to him again. And though it said nothing, Ares heard it clearly in his chest. The fight is not the end, it's the beginning. If you choose to see what follows, then it vanished into the smoke. Gone. Ares stood alone once more, but this time he did not feel alone, not completely. He looked down at his empty hands. He clenched them, loosened them, then turned from the valley and began to walk. Not back to Olympus, not toward the next war, but toward a place he did not yet know, a place where the war in his heart might, at last, begin to end. Chapter 5. The Mirror of Wrath. The land beyond the battlefield was scorched and silent. Villages stood hollow, doors hanging open, wells dry, crops withered in rows, untouched. The world did not shout here. It remembered. Ares walked with no sword, no shield, only the armour that clung to him like old guilt. Each step pressed into the dust and raised no sound. He had wandered far from Olympus, not because he was lost, because he needed to be. The spirit in the smoke had not left him, not truly. He felt it still, like a thread tied to his ribs, pulling him forward, pulling him inward. And one day it led him to a village, if it could still be called that. The buildings were cracked, roofs half collapsed. A single olive tree still stood in the square, leaning but alive. And beneath it sat a boy, alone, thin but not frail, covered in dust but not broken. A stick rested across his lap like a staff, or a sword pretending not to be one. He saw Ares, and did not move. No fear, no awe, just two eyes, dark and steady. Ares stepped closer. The boy didn't flinch. "Where is your family?" Ares asked, voice quiet. "Gone," the boy said. "You stayed?" Someone had to. Ares looked around. No soldiers, no carts, no smoke, just absence. He knelt across from the boy, not towering, not divine, just a man in armour. "Do you know who I am?" he asked. The boy studied him. "You're why they left." The words landed like stones, not shouted, not cruel, just true. Ares didn't argue. He couldn't. "Why haven't you run?" he asked. "Because I don't want to be like them." A pause. "Like me?" The boy shrugged. "Like everyone who thinks breaking things makes them strong." Ares looked at the stick in the boy's lap. It was carved, roughly but carefully. Etchings of waves, birds, a sun, not a weapon, a story. He reached for it. The boy held it tighter. Ares stopped. "What do you want?" he asked. "I want the world to stop shouting." The wind stirred the dust between them, and in the boy's face Ares saw not defiance. He saw himself, not the god they feared, the boy before the bronze, before the sword, a child who had never been asked what he wanted, only told what he was for. Ares sat back, removed his helm, laid it at his feet. "Tell me how to begin again," he said. The boy blinked. "I don't know. That makes two of us." They sat in silence. Not an empty one, a sacred one. Later, when Ares left, he left the helm behind, resting at the base of the olive tree, a symbol not of surrender, of listening. He did not take the boy's staff, but he remembered its carvings, and for the first time the god of war wondered, "What if I am more than what they made me?" The boy did not wave goodbye. He didn't need to. Ares felt it in his spine, the way silence can bless you more than praise. And as he walked on, the spirit's pull grew quieter, because something else had taken root. Understanding. Chapter 6. The Sword That Shattered. The war came without warning. Not the old war, not the clash of kings or banners, but something colder. A border dispute, a broken pact, the kind of spark mortals never intend to light, and yet always do. And so the fires rose again. Ares did not seek it. He heard it, the cries in the air, the call of blood, the sound of steel ringing like memory. He did not wish to answer, but gods are not always asked. They are invoked. And when mortals scream loud enough, Olympus listens. He stood once more upon a battlefield, but it felt different now. Not a stage, not a temple, a wound reopening. He wore no helm, no crest, only his armour, dulled by travel, and his sword, the last thing he had not yet given up. The armies faced each other in mirrored silence, like the valley he had left behind. Boys gripping spears too tightly, leaders with speeches half memorized, horses snorting, sensing what the men did not. He walked between the lines. They parted. Some dropped their weapons, some wept, one raised a bow. He caught the arrow. Again, "I am not here for victory," he said, his voice low, steady, echoing across the field. "Then what are you here for?" one general demanded. "To see if I still need this." He drew his sword, and for a moment the world held its breath. He raised it high, and the soldiers braced, but Ares turned and struck the earth. The blade plunged into the soil and shattered, not with a cry, with a sigh. The sound of something finished. A silence followed, one deeper than fear, a silence of endings. He looked at the pieces, scattered like bones, and felt no loss, only relief. "I don't need it any more," he said to no one, and to everything. The armies looked at him, unsure. "If you fight today," he continued, "know that I will not fight with you. If you choose peace, I will stand beside you. And if you do not," he looked at the broken sword, "then you stand alone." Some turned away, but most stayed. No command was given, no horn was blown. The field emptied like a dream forgotten. Later, as the stars rose, Ares sat alone where his sword had fallen. He touched the fragments gently. They did not burn him. He closed his eyes and whispered, "You did what you were made for. Now let me do the same." And the wind moved through the grass like breath through lungs, soft and alive. Chapter 7. The Still Flame. He stayed in the hills for a long time after. No wars, no summoning, no Olympus, just the sky and the wind and the trees that did not flinch at his name. Ares built no temple. He carved no symbols into stone. He simply chose a place and sat beneath an outcrop of dark rock, beside a thin stream that sang gently to itself. In the mornings he watched the mist rise. At night he lit a small fire. It was the fire that changed him most. He did not feed it with fury. He did not demand it burn high. He learned how to tend it. One branch at a time, one breath at a time. He watched it flicker, strengthen, settle, not roar but glow. He came to understand something he had never been taught. That flame could be fierce without destruction. That heat could warm, not only consume. That not every spark was a cry for battle. Sometimes it was a song. Animals came to him quietly. A fox once curled at his feet. A bird landed on his wrist and tilted its head, curious. A child, lost from a nearby village, found his way to Ares's fire one evening, eyes wide, lips trembling. Ares gave him bread, water, a place to sleep, no questions. The boy returned the next night, and the next. Soon others came, not many, and never loudly. Soldiers with shaking hands, widows with nowhere to go, Orphans who remembered only the sound of thunder, they found their way to him, not because he called, but because he didn't. He never claimed to heal them. He only sat, and the fire burned, steady, soft, still. The gods above murmured, whispers rose in Olympus. Ares has vanished, Ares has lost his edge, Ares no longer answers the call. But one god, old and wise and tired of thunder, said only this: perhaps he has begun to understand it. One night, when the moon hung low and full over the hills, Ares sat alone again. The boy had grown and gone. The others had moved on. Only the fire remained. He looked into it, really looked, and saw something he had never seen before. His reflection, not as warrior, not as destroyer, as a man who had learned to hold the flame without needing it to burn the world. He whispered to it, "You are still here. So am I." And in that moment he knew he had not abandoned war, he had redefined it. Chapter 8. Beneath the ashen sky. The war drums still echoed in some parts of the world. Not all battles had ended, not all kings had learned, but in the hills where the fire once burned, the grass had grown tall, and the wind moved gently, as if it too had finally rested. Ares walked there, not with sword or shield, only with memory. His armour no longer gleamed. He wore a cloak of dark red, faded by sun and ash. A branch served as his staff. His footprints, once deep, were now soft. He had become something few expected, something slower, something wiser. Mortals no longer ran when they saw him. Some bowed, some nodded. A few asked quietly, "Are you him?" He never said yes. He never said no. He only smiled, a rare thing, and kept walking. Once he came to a village rebuilding its walls. A stonecutter, back bent with effort, saw him and asked, "Will you help?" And Ares did. He lifted beams, he carried stone. He worked until his hands bled, not from battle, but from belonging. No one asked him for war. No one needed to. He sat by their fire that night and listened to their stories of old fears, of fresh hopes, of dreams that had survived the burning. A child passed him a bowl of lentils. He took it with both hands. "Thank you," he said, not as a god, as a man. As dusk deepened, he climbed the highest hill beyond the village. The sky above was pale with cloud, soft with the memory of storms, not golden, not blue, but ashen, and he stood beneath it, the sky that had once thundered at his name and felt no need to shout. He had not unmade war, but he had changed what it meant to him, from force to focus, from noise to knowing, from rage to restraint. And in the wind he heard a voice he had not heard since the valley of his undoing, the spirit in the smoke. It said only this: "You chose. That is enough." He sat, he watched the clouds, he breathed, and for the first time in all his long, furious life, Ares knew peace.